The strangest part wasn't the saves, it wasn't the result, it wasn't even the history that had just been made. It was the fact that after one of the biggest moments of his life, after surviving wave after wave of pressure against Spain, after becoming the face of one of the greatest underdog stories of the World Cup, a 40-year-old goalkeeper was standing there crying because his mother wasn't in the stadium. And the deeper you look into why she wasn't there, the uglier this story becomes. Because on the field, this looked like football at its purest. Cape Verde, population around 500,000 people. A nation so small that most football fans barely expected them to be part of the conversation. Standing across from them was Spain, one of football's giants, one of the favorites. This wasn't supposed to be close. This wasn't supposed to be difficult. This definitely wasn't supposed to end with Spain frustrated, confused, and staring at a scoreboard that still read 0-0. But there was one problem. One man kept refusing to let reality happen. Josemar Diaz, better known as Vozinha. And even that nickname carries its own story. Because Vozinha wasn't some superstar goalkeeper playing for Real Madrid or Manchester City. He wasn't one of football's global celebrities. At 40 years old, he was playing in Portugal's second division. Second division, 40 years old, against Spain. For most players, age 40 is retirement territory. Careers are ending, bodies are slowing down, people are becoming coaches or pundits. Vozinha was doing something else. He was making World Cup history. Spain kept coming. Attack after attack, shot after shot, 27 shots in total, 27, 7 saves, 7 moments where the dream nearly ended, 7 moments where this story almost became predictable again. Because football has a habit of correcting itself, the big teams usually win, the giants usually survive, the underdogs usually get a nice story and then reality returns, except reality wasn't returning. 90 minutes passed, final whistle, 0-0, and suddenly a goalkeeper playing in relative obscurity became one of the stories of the tournament. People around the world were asking the same question. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? How is this even happening? But then cameras caught something strange. Vozinha wasn't celebrating like everyone expected. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't running around wildly. He wasn't laughing. He was crying, actually crying. And at first people assumed what people usually assume: emotion, pressure, joy, maybe disbelief. But then the real reason started coming out, and suddenly the football story became something much heavier. Because these weren't tears about football, not really. They were tears about family. They were tears about people who weren't there. Vozinha had spoken before about his grandparents, the people who raised him, the people who inspired his nickname, the people who helped shape his life long before stadiums and cameras and World Cups ever appeared. They had already passed away, so in the biggest moment of his career, they couldn't see it. That alone is painful enough. But then there was another absence, his mother, Candida Evora. She was alive, she wanted to come, and she still wasn't there. Now suddenly people started asking a different question. Wait, why wasn't his mother there? This is the World Cup. This is FIFA. This is one of the richest sporting events on earth. How does a player's mother miss the biggest moment of his life? And that's where the story starts taking a turn, because it wasn't injury, it wasn't illness, it wasn't some family emergency, it was bureaucracy, a visa issue. More specifically, a financial wall, a $15,000 US visa bond requirement, $15,000. Think about that number for a second. This wasn't a billionaire owner. This wasn't a superstar family flying private jets. This was a mother trying to watch her son play at the World Cup. And suddenly one of football's most beautiful stories had collided with something completely different. Paperwork, policy, money, cold systems. The kind of systems that don't care about moments. The kind of systems that don't care about dreams. And now people started looking at the timeline. Because timing would make this story even harder to explain. Just weeks earlier, the visa bond requirement for ticket holders had reportedly been suspended. Suspended. But the announcement came too late. Too late to organize money, too late to make plans, too late to arrange travel, too late, always too late. And now football fans started asking something uncomfortable. Wait a second, if the policy changed, if people knew there was a problem, if this was one of the stories of the World Cup, then who was helping? Because somebody had to be doing something, right? And that's where things get awkward, because people actually did start moving. Fans reacted, politicians reacted, people inside Cape Verde reacted. Efforts started building to bring Anna there. People recognized the human side of the story immediately because they understood something very simple. Football isn't really about tactics. It isn't really about formations. It's people, it's moments, it's families, it's sacrifice, it's mothers watching children chase impossible dreams. People understood that instantly. But there was one name people kept waiting to hear: FIFA. Silence. Nothing. And the silence started becoming louder. Because FIFA wasn't some helpless observer here. This was the organization that promoted this tournament as one of the most inclusive World Cups ever. Inclusive. That word matters, because when organizations use words like inclusive, they aren't making football statements, they're making moral statements. They're telling people what they stand for. And FIFA is not a poor organization. We're talking about billions, billions in revenue, billions generated around tournaments built on stories exactly like this one. Underdogs, dreams, families, emotion, hope. Those aren't side products. Those are the product. That's what people buy. That's what people watch. That's what gets turned into documentaries and advertisements and social media clips. So people started asking the obvious question: if FIFA can build entire campaigns around human stories, why couldn't they help this one human being? And defenders of FIFA would say something important here. To be fair, FIFA doesn't control immigration systems. They don't control government policy. They don't issue visas. That's true, completely true. But that's also where the argument becomes uncomfortable. Because critics weren't saying FIFA caused every problem, they were asking something else. Did FIFA even try? Did they call? Did they intervene? Did they assist? Did they use any of the influence that comes with being one of the biggest sporting organizations on earth? Because this wasn't some random story hidden in a local newspaper. This became global. People knew, people talked, people reacted, and still, nothing, at least not at first. Because then something happened that made people even more frustrated. Eventually, efforts outside FIFA helped make the reunion happen. People worked, people pushed, people solved the problem. And suddenly there she was, his mother. The emotional reunion everyone wanted. The moment everybody had hoped for, a beautiful scene, the kind of scene that reminds people why sports can feel magical. But then came the detail that made some people stop and stare. Because FIFA showed up, not to solve it, not to initiate it, not to fight for it, to film it, to package it, to post it, to turn it into heartwarming content. And suddenly critics had a new accusation. FIFA did not get her there. FIFA did not create the solution. FIFA did not remove the obstacle. But FIFA was there when the cameras arrived. And that's where this story becomes bigger than one goalkeeper. Because suddenly people weren't talking about Vozinha anymore. They were talking about a pattern where football creates extraordinary human moments, while the machinery around football feels increasingly distant from the humans creating them. Because this isn't the first time people have looked at football's biggest institutions and asked whether the image and the reality are starting to drift apart. The sport itself keeps delivering miracles. Unknown players become heroes. Small nations shock giants. Dreams become real. Football still does that. Football still works. But people are increasingly asking whether the machine surrounding football works the same way. Because the machine loves stories. It loves emotion. It loves inspiration. It loves struggle. As long as somebody else handles the suffering first, and maybe that's the uncomfortable question sitting underneath all of this, because Vozinha gave the world exactly what football always promises. Hope, seek, the impossible becoming possible. But if a 40-year-old goalkeeper can shut out Spain in the World Cup, if a tiny country can shock the world, if impossible things can happen on the field, then maybe people start wondering something else. Why do impossible things suddenly become impossible the moment real human beings need help off the field? And that's the question that still hasn't gone away.